Committee will come to order. Good afternoon. I'm Steve Chabot, the Chair of the Committee. I want to apologize for not being able to start on time. We had votes on the floor, so that's the reason we're starting a little bit late. So for any inconvenience to anybody, we apologize. And I'd like to welcome everyone, my colleagues, and our distinguished witnesses to the Subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific hearing this afternoon. Mr. Falliman-Vega, our ranking member, unfortunately cannot be with us today, but we are pleased to have Representative Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii, and she'll be able to take the position as ranking member here this afternoon. We're also joined by Ms. Meng, or will be this afternoon, and I would ask unanimous consent that she be permitted to sit in with the subcommittee and be recognized to speak after all members of the subcommittee have been recognized, and without objection, so ordered. The Bangladesh story has been an impressive one, and it's a nation that has worked hard to lift itself from the war-torn ruins left behind by its bloody 1971 War of Independence from Pakistan. Over the last 20 years, there's been marked progress, especially on the economic front, as Bangladesh has grown into a crucial link between the dominant economies within the Indo-Pacific Economic Corridor. Strategically located between Asia's two powerhouses, India and China, and prominently situated within the Arc of Islam that extends from the Middle East into Southeast Asia, Bangladesh plays a key role in maintaining regional stability. As a moderate, secular nation, Bangladesh has become an important security partner for the United States in the fight against terrorism and Islamic extremism in South Asia, as well as a collaborator on humanitarian assistance, peacekeeping operations, and maritime security. While there have been some noteworthy economic and social improvements, particularly over the past decade, Bangladesh is still a very poor country with an estimated 153 million people who live in poverty. And sadly, conditions for many working Bangladeshis remain dangerous and unhealthy. 6 months after the tragedy at Rana Plaza, in which 1,127 Bangladeshi workers were killed, changes have been slow to materialize. Corruption also remains a significant obstacle to Bangladesh's place in the world economy, and the government's sluggish efforts to combat it will only serve as further impediment to its economic growth. As Bangladesh approaches its national elections, which are likely to take place in early January, the country is in a state of political turmoil. In Bangladesh, politics, as usual, I'm afraid, takes on a much harsher meaning than it does in many societies. As the major political parties ramp up their campaigns, operatives utilize strikes, riots, and blockades to destabilize the country and call attention to their grievances. When I visited Bangladesh about 2 weeks ago, we arrived at the onset of a 3-day general strike, essentially shutting down commerce called by the opposition Bangladesh National Party, BNP. During our stay, there were numerous reports of violence. While in Dhaka, I had the opportunity to meet with both the Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, of the Awami League, and the opposition leader, former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia of BNP. During those meetings, I expressed my view that the national elections should be free and fair, transparent, and without violence. Both leaders were adamant in their positions. Sheikh Hasina insisted that provisions were in place to conduct a fair election. Madam Zia maintained that a fair election could not be held without a caretaker government in place to ensure transparency. As of today, the two sides remain at odds, and it is still uncertain whether or not the opposition BNP will boycott the election. In meetings with the leaders, I stressed the need to curtail the growing violence, which can only bring about further instability, possibly leading to the expansion of extremist groups and creating a vacuum that could create broader security risks for the region. I also expressed my concerns about Bangladesh's International Crimes Tribunal, which was created by Sheikh Hasina in 2010 to investigate alleged crimes committed during the 1971 War for Independence, so about 42 years ago. Opposition leaders view the tribunal as a vehicle for the incumbent leadership to punish its enemies and strengthen its hand in the lead-up to the elections. Since the tribunal began handing down death sentences in February, numerous outbreaks of violence have occurred. Critics of the tribunal, many of whom agree that trials should be held and that the guilty should be punished, maintain that international standards are not being applied. When I brought this up with the Foreign Minister, I was told, quote, "We are actually creating new international standards," unquote. Based on some of the reports I heard about the conduct of the trials, that response was not very reassuring, particularly in light of concerns expressed by U.S. Ambassador Stephen Rapp, who heads the State Department's Office of Global Criminal Justice and was a former prosecutor of the Sierra Leone and Rwanda trials. Ambassador Rapp, who has visited Bangladesh 3 times in an attempt to advise the ICT and the government on international standards, was largely ignored. Among the issues about which he expressed concerns were interrogation without cause, lengthy pretrial detentions, a lack of sufficient protections for witnesses and victims, and allowing prosecutors to call more witnesses than defendants were allowed to call. Hopefully, we can have some discussion about the Court this afternoon, among many other issues that we will be discussing. So in a nutshell, I would say that Bangladesh has much going for it and much standing in the way of its continuing progress. I look forward to hearing from our excellent panel of witnesses here this afternoon and hope we can address some of the issues in greater